Rob's high-tech color board of truth and justice. As you can tell, it's the Christmas special edition. So welcome. Today what we're going to be talking about is ICBC and the way in which they have set it up so that it would appear that we no longer have the rights that our parents and our grandparents did. Now, most people will believe that you need a driver's license in order to get out on the highway and engage in your common law right to travel. However, that's not the case. The fact is, there's no one in ICBC who's willing to claim that the common law right to travel no longer exists, and I'll tell you why. Anytime you get stopped on the highway, the police are going to be pointing to what they like to refer to as the Motor Vehicle Act. Now, depending on where you are, they might call it the Highway Traffic Act, Highway Safety Act, something along those lines, but they will point to a body of words. And they will claim that because of this body of words, you have certain duties. And these duties involve submitting an application for registration for your automobile, turning it into a motor vehicle, and that you must produce identification, license, and obey all the rules of the road and the Motor Vehicle Act. You must stop for them, and essentially you have to contract with this private entity called ICBC, which is the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. Now, insurance has been identified, it's legally defined as a scheme. And it is a form of gambling. And we all know the house always makes their money when it comes to gambling, don't we? So the question is, does the MVA, does the Motor Vehicle Act create an obligation upon us to do what these people want us to do? Or is it merely an invitation, which if accepted? Now the problem is, I know what the truth is. I've looked at it, and I'll explain to you why the Motor Vehicle Act simply doesn't affect previously existing rights. I'll tell you why. It's very simple. The previously existing rights aren't mentioned at all. There's a concept at law that says an act which has the intent or the purpose of affecting a previously existing right must do so clearly, specifically, and unequivocally. You can't not mention a right and then claim that an act removed that right because it wasn't mentioned. Otherwise, the Motor Vehicle Act would remove a whole slew of rights. For a right to be affected by a body of words such as the MVA, it must be mentioned. The Motor Vehicle Act must mention the previously existing common law right to travel in privately owned automobiles in order to claim that the Motor Vehicle Act, in order for them to claim that the Motor Vehicle Act affects it. If it's not mentioned clearly, specifically, and unequivocally, then it is not affected clearly, specifically, and unequivocally. Now the problem is, you talk to the people in ICBC, they know this. They know that they're merely a corporation engaging in a gambling scheme to extract money, and they will claim public safety, and they point that all they're doing is what the provincial government has told them to do. So it's the provincial government now that has the liability, because they're the ones directing ICBC, who then, what do? They, of course, go out and they hire cops with guns. And tasers. Big sticks. Steel-toe boots. Now these cops with guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots, they operate upon the assumption that the words created by the provincial government, this MVA, which empowers ICBC and which empowers ICBC to empower the cops, they operate like that body of words gives them a complete monopoly on the roads, and that they now have the right to stop us from exercising in previously existing rights. And if it wasn't for this MVA, they would have no power, no right whatsoever to bring forth anything against someone. So remove that. Are you doing anything unlawful? Clearly not. Now comes the time where does it say in the MVA that the previously existing right? And you might get off, but the cop still gets to arrest you and harass you. And if you take it into court, you know what the judge will say? These cops, they're operating with color of right. They're wrong, they're ignorant of the law, they're grossly negligent, but because ICBC never told them the limits of their authority, they have the right to operate in the manner that they do. And if you try taking it to ICBC, then you get a whole bunch of lawyers and you get a big runaround and try getting a straight answer from them. So the question is the head of ICBC willing to claim under oath and full commercial liability that the common law right to travel no longer exists? And if he is not willing to do that, does he not have a duty to inform these cops with guns, tasers, big sticks, and steel-toe boots as to the limits of their authority? I think he does. Now, let's look at the next bit here. Okay, we've seen what insurance is. It's a scheme. It's gambling. It's something that the house makes a lot of money at. And here's a little point in law. You cannot be obliged to engage in a gambling scheme. No one can force you to do that. It's a basic function of law. Look, it's like magic. And the people in the provincial government, they know this. Now, the C, I'm using the color one now. The C means they're a corporation. It's Insurance Corporation of British Columbia. Now here's the thing about corporations. They are obliged to act, they're limited in what they can do because acting as a corporation provides them with a certain level of protection and benefit. However, that benefit produces certain liabilities which limits them. If they want the benefits that acting as a corporation affords them, they must bear the burdens. And one of those burdens is that they are obliged to use contract. They can't claim that you have any obligation to them in the absence of a contract. Now, what about the people who never do what the MVA, the Motor Vehicle Act here, wants them to do? And that, of course, is submit an application and register their automobile so that it can be deemed a motor vehicle under that act. The provincial government has taken great steps, or the people in the provincial government, because all they are people using words. And these people and their words, they've created the Motor Vehicle Act, which apparently empowers the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia to monitor or license the motor vehicles or the people who use our roads for their commercial benefit. And that's all fine and good. But now the problem is that ICBC, the people, have hired these people. And these cops don't know what the Motor Vehicle Act actually says and the limits upon it. They operate upon the assumption